I am Dani Klein Modisett, the founder and CEO of Laughter on Call, breaking barriers and building bonds one laugh at a time. And I am delighted to have Alison Fragale here today. She is a likable badass, just like the book she has out. That is a very big hit. Let me tell you a little bit more about Dr. Fragale. She is a professor at UNC. She received her PhD in organizational behavior from the Stanford University Graduate School of Business and her BA in math and economics from Dartmouth. Dartmouth in the house. Graduating magna cum laude and Phi Beta Kappa. She does not mess around. She is a prominent scholar and professor known for her expertise in organizational behavior, negotiation, and conflict management. And she has a reputation for blending rigorous academic research with practical application in the workplace. And lucky for us, she put it all together in one fantastic book called Likable Badass, as you can see from her logo, How Women Get the Success They Deserve. Oh, love it so much. Welcome, Alison.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so cool. So I definitely want to dig into the book, but first, why don't you just tell us a little bit about you? And I think it's so funny. So I heard an interview, you were asked about why you wrote the book and when you wrote the book, and you said you wrote it during COVID because you weren't going to bake sourdough bread. And I thought, very funny, so true. I get it. But tell us, if you can, just in a couple sentences, like the genesis of all of this.
Yeah, I get that book origin question a lot. And I think people are looking like I was in the rain and somehow I had this vision. And it was much more subtle than that. I mean, I'm a psychologist. I've been doing work in behavioral science for 20 plus years. And how it kind of came to be was I've spent a lot of my life teaching in rooms that have mostly men in them. Whether it's an MBA classroom, which has mostly men, or whether it's a leadership development program in a company, mostly men. And a lot of the things I teach are about how people can negotiate, influence, advocate for themselves. And what would happen over the years was that there's always people who come to you after the class, who come to stand at the podium to ask you the question that they didn't want to ask in front of the entire room or the story they wanted to tell you. And what I noticed over the years is that that line or those group of people was majority women who were basically saying, "Hey, Allison, I've got a challenge," whatever it was. I'm trying to negotiate for a raise and I'm not getting it. Or my client keeps wanting to not talk to me and talk to my boss over my head, or some, all these things. So I started offering advice, not just my opinion, but the advice that I knew from my field that had been really helpful to me to navigate my own life. Like, what does psychology have to offer us that might be helpful to you in this problem that you're facing today? And so that began me taking the work that I had always done and using it to help challenges that women were saying that they were confronting time and again. And so, yes, COVID gave me the free time on my calendar to finally turn it into a book. Yeah, I decided I was never going to bake sourdough bread, and I had already watched The Tiger King. So I was like, I'm literally out of things to do. And so this book had been brewing for a while. It's based on my research on status. I just truly did not have the capacity to write it until I had this break. So as much as COVID was devastating in so many ways for so many people, I'm grateful for that time because it brought this to life and brought me to you.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I relate to so much of that. I actually also am a Dartmouth grad, but I am like way older. So I was there when like we were in the not the first class women, but within the first decade of women. And so it was a lot of men. And the classes were like, I don't know, 70-30, 80-20. And what was interesting about that is I went on to become a comedian and same thing, go to comedy clubs. In fact, I was at a club last night and it was still 80-20. Like it's very many male dominated fields for sure.
Okay, I must pause on this. Were you at a club as an audience member or as a performer?
Yeah, only as audience last night. I don't really do clubs anymore. That's a whole other conversation that has to do with, foul language. No. So I like to be a service, which is, why I love your book, because it's so much about taking, as you say, so much about taking what your expertise is, your gifts, and then caring for, like helping people. And so let's just, oh, but I have to ask you one thing quickly as a
Yeah.
wordsmith also. The tag of your book, How Women Get the Success They Deserve. So I've written a couple books and I know the tag like is very important, what the tag says. So I'm curious about how you got to the word deserve. Like, were there other options? Because what I love about it is it doesn't say how women get the success they want or, they think would be nice. Like, it's like you are sending a message even with that word. So I'm wondering if there's any conversation about that.
Okay, well, there's a conversation. It may not be where you're going. Here's the deal. I sell this book to Penguin Random House on proposal, so before I've written it. And many books get their titles like late in the process. But when I sold this book, I sold it as Likable Badass. Um, what I wanted to call the subtitle was a matter of much debate very late in the game. What I wanted to call the book was Likable Badass: How Women Win the Status Game. I was super proud of that title. My editor, everyone loved Likable Badass. That was really important to me. But they said no on the subtitle. I said, what do you mean? It's a great title. And she said, Alison, no one really understands what status is yet, which is why the book is interesting, but you cannot put words on the cover of a book that people don't understand. It's a terrible marketing strategy for selling books. Okay, so I trusted her, but I thought that was interesting in itself, that there's this fundamental human need that we all have that we know so little about that I can't call it what it is on the book. But okay, fine. So then the publishing team says, we are going to call this the new science of successful women. That's what it was. Then it was, and it stuck. I didn't love that title, but they said we really want science on here so people understand it has academic depth and it's not just a cheerleading book or whatever it is. Fine. So that's what it was going to be called. I didn't love it, but they were like, trust me, this is how you sell books. So it actually goes onto Amazon with that title. Like, you could have bought a version of this book that had that. Now, that you wouldn't have gotten shipped to you because it didn't exist yet, but like it was on Amazon to pre-order. Okay. But then they start telling the sales team at Penguin Random House, we have this new book. And the sales team, as I understand it, has a lot of power and a lot of status in publishing because they're the ones who go and convince Barnes and Noble to buy your book. The sales team says, no, that subtitle is not good. Change it. So then they come back to me and I said, I told you I didn't love it in the first place. I deferred to you the first time. Now what do we want to call it? If I tell you we went 83 rounds and like 286 subtitles, and I thought, oh my God, this is February of last year. So this is about a year ago. The book comes out in September. So 7 months before the book's about to launch, we have no subtitle. And I thought this book is going to fall apart. It's completely written. It's totally ready to go. And we can't agree on a subtitle. My editor is actually the one who came back up with this. And when she said it, I'm like, that's really good. She got it from my proposal. So she was digging through everything I'd ever written to think about how did I talk about this? And this was something I had written in the text. Okay. So we saved the day. You can still, if you're like a good like internet sleuther, find versions that refer to the old subtitle. So that's all to say, that's not the question you really asked, but I had to get that off my chest because it was very traumatic. Now, the idea about deserve, I didn't quibble over that, but why do I like that word? Why had I used this phrase in a proposal? Because I always say the most warm and capable people I know in my life are women. They're spectacular. So that represents who people are, like who I think I am, who I think you are, who I think a lot of people are. Like, I am likable and badass, which means I should get credit for that. And when I don't get credit for what I truly am, I am not getting what I deserve. And so, yes, people want it, but I think it's unfair that you can have great qualities that the world does not appreciate. And so, even though I was not hyper focused on that, I was just happy to have a subtitle. I think deserve is the right word because you deserve to be seen as you truly are. And I think the women that I am privileged to know are likable badasses.
All right. Well, I'm glad I asked because it takes it explains it beyond entitlement, which is always a danger in that. But I think what you're saying is it was a mission to have people to have women particularly feel recognized. So yeah, good.
Right. The fact that people have not honored your accomplishments as much as they should have at moments is undeserved. And let's fix that.
Love it. Love it. Okay, so let's get back to the word status, because I totally know why someone might be like, yeah, how about not put on the cover? Because status, like it has a negative connotation of status seeking rather than status earning, which I think is what you were addressing. And because it can be had with a Gucci bag, nice bag, suddenly status. And I think what you're talking about, and when you unpack so well, is using your gifts to achieve the status. So if you could talk a little bit, and you make a distinction about status and power and respect, and I don't want to ask you to read your whole book, but if you could just share with the audience like some of the details of that, the specifics of that.
100%. So this is status. Whole book is about status. What is status? Status is the extent to which you are respected and highly regarded by other people. So my status is other people's respect that they have for me. Your status, other people's respect that they have for you. Now, a lot of times when people think about the word status, they do think about a status symbol, like a bag, a car. Well, that's kind of related in the sense that if I have a material good, and that material good causes my audience to think I am worthy of respect. I must have a lot of money. I must have a really good job. And they respect me because of that. Then the bag or the car, whatever it is, did that job. But status is truly deeper than that. It's really the judgment of other people that they respect and value us. And so if we try to seek it solely through trimmings and trappings, you won't be as effective if you can really have a deeper effect on your audience. So that's what it's really about. And status is a fundamental human need. What that means is that we have documented all human beings seek status, and life is better with it than without it. To not be respected is detrimental to your physical and mental health, everything from life expectancy to reproductive success. And I say, like basically physically and psychologically, lacking respect is just as damaging as living a life without friends. So we all should be status seekers in the sense that status is a valuable resource to our life. And when we have it, we can live better. The way we get it relates to the part of the book that was never in dispute, Likable Badass. That's catchy, I think. I came up with it. But it's not just catchy. It's designed to reference the two places that respect comes from. So we all walk around as perceivers of the world. We perceive other human beings, and we're always drawing conclusions about those human beings. And other people are doing that to us. The judgments that people make about us, they're not random. We evaluate people all the time on two things we're trying to figure out. First, do you care about me? Are your intentions good? I want someone who's going to make my life better, not someone who's selfish and not someone who's going to compete with me or, in like caveman days, try to kill me. I want someone who's going to add to my life. So that's going to be the likable. Psychologists will call that your warmth. I'll also call it warmth. Are you oriented toward others? Things like not just likable, but are you honest? Are you sincere? Are you giving? Are you agreeable? All those characteristics make it more pleasant to interact with you because you're more caring about other people. So that's the first thing. We want someone whose intentions are good toward us. But it's not the only thing for respect. So I always say everyone always has at least one flaky friend. You love the friend. They're great to hang out with. But like if you have a 6 a.m. flight and someone needs to make sure that the Uber comes at 4 a.m., you're never telling this friend to make the plans because you're like, it's 50-50, it even gets done. I'm going to, have someone else do it. So the second dimension, once we care about like you're warm and you're other oriented, is are you capable? If I put something in your hands, can you execute on it well? And that we respect too. So you're organized, you're persistent, you're dedicated, you're competent. That is a set of characteristics that psychologists will often call our assertiveness. We can kind of control our environment. On the cover of the book, I call it badass. But this is the idea is anytime you show up to your audience in a way that convinces your audience, because they get to judge your status, convinces your audience you care about them and you're good at what you do, respect follows. So the idea is we do care about people and we are good at what we do. If we can communicate that in a way that other people see it and appreciate it, we get this respect coming from them. And that's this really valuable resource. So I always say showing up as your likable, badass self is the most controllable thing you can do to get other people to respect your values.
Yeah, yeah. So that whole like charming, seeming like you care, and I say seeming because I've worked and lived in Los Angeles for almost 30 years. And I think it gets a little tricky because if someone is well practiced at seeming like they care, like I'm the biggest sucker for that. Like, and I'm always surprised, when it was transactional. And so that's something what I love again about what you're talking about is genuine generosity, and that's evidence throughout the book of different actions that you take to be of service, to promote others, to help others. And I think where it gets tricky is when you are vulnerable to someone who is perhaps feigning that they care, and really it's all strategic. So I'm wondering, do you have any experience with that, or if a student came to you and said, you know what, I got bait and switched on this?
I mean, look, it's going to happen because sometimes you can't, you can't tell in an individual interaction, but here's the point. Eventually you figured it out because their true self came through. So what I always say to people is if you don't care about anyone but yourself and you're not good at anything, I can't help you. But I presume that I'm talking to people who genuinely do care, not about everybody equally, but they care about a certain set of people and they have good capabilities and skills, at least in some areas. And if that's the case, then you're not a fraud. You're authentic. You just need to figure out how to sell it. But yes, are there people who definitely will convince you that they're more warm and likable than and then they show their true colors? Of course. I think with this kind of stuff, you're playing a long game. In any given interaction, you might fall for something, or maybe you don't show up as your warmest, most capable self, and you don't make a great impression. That happens too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if those things happen occasionally, that's life. You're not a robot. You're not perfect. What I don't want for people, particularly for women, is to unknowingly make a lifetime of bad mistakes about how they show up in
Mm.
ways that are systematically costing them respect while they're over here working harder than anybody else to produce amazing work. Like that is the bigger thing I'm worried about than the occasional, I was a little too trusting.
Yeah. Okay. So I love that because I do a lot of obviously training comedy tools for better communication. And of course, I was scanning right away. Where's self-deprecation in her book? Where's self-deprecation in the book? And of course, you address it, as does anyone who's interested in good communication and warmth, right? Because it is a way of lowering your status by throwing yourself under the bus somewhat. And my distinction is always, and I always say, not for women, by the way, I do always say no women, we don't need to do that. But if you're going to do it, you should not do it about the thing you're hired to do. Right. So
Correct.
I'm going to talk about I'll tell you about my cooking because I
That's
defy.
right.
Right. But you have an even more nuanced approach to self-deprecation. So the humor bragging, I think you call it, right?
Yes, humor bragging is better. So yes, I am a lifelong self-deprecator. It's not and a lot of people use it because it is funny, and comedians can have entire sets and shticks that their whole thing is knocking themselves down on a stage. It is very funny, and being funny is both warm and it's very assertive. It's a mark of intelligence to be able to make people laugh, and it feels good and it's cohesive. So if you're funny, leaning into being funny is a good thing to do. That's why I always say, like, I'm hilarious, you're hilarious. That's good. But if the funny is always at your own expense, then that can be problematic because it's warm, but it's knocking down your own capabilities. And yes, if you're doing it on the thing that people are relying on you for, that's worse. But a lot of times people do it without needing to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And when they start to examine, like, what am I going for here? I just want to be nice and humble. So, as an example, I can be nice and humble by complimenting you on something you're amazing at. I don't have to use myself as the incompetent referent, like, oh my God, I'm so terrible at this. You're so amazing. I can just say, right, Dani is spectacular, right? She's hilarious. And I don't say like she's so much funnier than me. So a lot of times we are going for something that's very legitimate. I want to be nice. I want to build you up, but I don't have to use myself to cut it down.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it's problematic is that what the science shows, we are considered the experts on ourselves. So if I tell you I'm not good at something, why would you have any reason other than to believe me? So when people mock their own intelligence, people rate them as less intelligent. When they mock their attractiveness, they're seen as less attractive. So when you
Mm.
do these things, people believe you. And so looking for other tools that allow you to be just as friendly and warm. Research was coming out just as this book was going to press on the humor brag. So people have heard about the humble brag, which is like, you're like, oh my God, like I get mistaken for Reese Witherspoon all the time. It's so annoying, or whatever it is, right? That is dumb, and don't do that. And it's terrible. And then, but the humor brag is if you can talk about something positive about yourself in a way that's not self-deprecating, but is funny-ish, that can be really good. So there are some examples from the research, but like I was, giving an example, like, um, you know, the the makeup artist that did my makeup before my television appearance was so amazing. I told her I was going to have her name tattooed on my arm. Okay. You're not rolling off your seat. You're like, that's funny. But it's not self-deprecating. But like I was able to
No.
talk about the fact that I had this good experience. Like I was on TV and then I said something that was not at my own expense, but humorous about it. If that's your style and you can work that in, that's a way. But you're like, I can't do that. You don't have to only do that. The key is thinking about ways that you can be your warm, humble self without rejecting compliments, which is actually the worst of the worst. It's even worse than self-deprecating, because when you reject a compliment, you're actually seen as like an unlikable dumbass. So
I know. I loved what you said about, and I think this is you that said, if I am not receiving your compliment, I'm giving you my opinion of your opinion, and my opinion's better, by the way. You know?
that came from Chris Littlefield, who, if people do not follow him, you absolutely should. He's an expert on like workplace communication and gratitude and recognition. And so I interviewed him at that part. And yeah, he said, when someone is complimenting you, they are giving you their opinion. They are not interested about your opinion of their opinion. Like that's what that is.
That was
And
shocking to me. I was
right.
This kind of ties into another big theme in your book, which is about self-promotion, promoting. And that's something I really bristle at also, and I had a situation where I was on the phone with actually a Dartmouth alum, and she was asking me, I was going to go speak there. And, we had a nice conversation, and then I got off the phone, and then another friend of ours called and said, well, I have a bone to pick with you. You didn't mention anything about the Forbes 50 over 50 to this woman, and she couldn't believe it. And she was actually thought that was not professional of you not to bring that up in the conversation. And because I got the Forbes 50/50 last year. And yeah, no, it's very nice, but you can see like it's like, what do I need, a poster? I don't know. And so I didn't feel that it was something I had to lead with. And yet this woman felt almost like insulted that I didn't bring it up, or, you know what I mean? So I think this idea of how we present our accomplishments with grace is a big challenge for women.
For sure. It is. And I'd say again, we're the experts on ourselves. We have to be doing it because so much of what people learn about us comes from us. If we do not tell them, how would they possibly know? Which means you're just going to get a lot less respect from a lot smaller audience, because most of those people don't know what you're doing until you tell them. So finding authentic ways to put it in. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to say the same thing to everyone and be a robot and be like, here's my 50 best accomplishments, let's go. But to look for moments of opportunity. That's where I do think things like social media profiles, you can put things in there. That means you don't have to be saying it all the time,
Mm-hmm.
People can see it. Social media posts and things are good for that. Even like signatures of emails, you could even put like, so super honored, like to be a Forbes 50 over 50, to check out the other amazing people, like click here or whatever it is. And then it's there and people can see it if they're curious. Or you can look for opportunities to naturally drop it. If you say, I'm in this conversation, this person respecting me is very important to me. It enables me to do my best work and be influential and make the impact I want to make. So I can't let this go. I need to make a good impression. We care a lot about making a good impression. And then think, what's the natural way that I could put this into the conversation? And some of the ways that feel more natural to people are also very, very good ways. One example would be to find a way to talk about it where you also would shine a light on somebody else who was worthy of recognition in the process. So I don't know if the 50 over 50, like what the right example would be, but maybe something like I was nominated for it and I was really grateful to the person who put my name forward. Or I'm really grateful for, my partners that I've worked with all these years who have enabled me to like shine and get recognition like this and things like that. So when we
Mhm.
highlight an accomplishment and then also give some thanks to somebody who deserves thanks for our accomplishment, that's called dual promotion. And one, it feels often more comfortable to people to do that, to say, I'm acknowledging this while I'm giving gratitude. It's also strategic. The research shows that when you do it that way, you get the confidence boost that you did a good thing. You also get the warmth boost because you're complimenting and giving gratitude to other people. So looking for ways that feel authentic to you, and once you find your ways, then you're able to lean into them, more. But this is where I say the long-term game. I think you never telling anyone that is a missed opportunity. That
Mhm.
doesn't mean you have to tell everyone that all the time. Like the person in front of you in the grocery store does not care and you're going to look weird. So, but just being willing to look for your natural moments and not be afraid to take them when the door gets opened.
Right. Well, it's a big leap in many respects, going from comedy and writing books, which were individual endeavors, to now everything you're talking about, socialization and missteps. It's so funny. So I'm reading your book yesterday and going online and reading more and texting, going back to LinkedIn and texting. And then I see your post about don't use text for business connections, outreach. And I had literally just written to a woman in New York who runs a senior community and been like, hey, I'm going to be here. And then I read your post. I was like, oh, it's in real time, this is happening. So I apologize. And I apologized, and she got right back to me. So those kind of boundaries that you make really, really clear in the book are so, so helpful. I just want to let you know
Well,
it's happening in real time.
thank you. I will say that the texting thing was a bit of definitely a personal rant. I don't know if everyone, and the comments were like, most people agreed. Some people don't feel that way. I just feel like the mom in me like has to have my phone like within arm's length the entire time, lest I get some call from the school nurse. And yet every time I look, it's not the school nurse. It's somebody who wants me to like execute something. And I'm like, okay, no, anyway.
Right.
But thank you for saying that. I try to
Yeah.
be action oriented.
Yeah, yeah. So another point that you make in the book is that like just getting your name out there, just being out there, like the more it's science backed, the more people see the product person, the more they like it. And I had a situation where somebody was just bombarding and it actually didn't make me like her more. Like I was like, okay, that's enough. And I'm wondering if there's like what the boundary, if there are any boundaries around that, that you've experienced.
So, what the phenomenon is mere exposure, which is familiar things are liked more. The best way to understand it is if you think about a song on the radio that you're really liking right now, you like it more now than the first time you heard it. When you hear a song for the first time, you're like, what is this? It's unfamiliar. Then as it becomes familiar, you start to like it more. That's true for people and for names. So just the fact that I've heard of that person before creates a bit of familiarity and a bit of liking. That
Hmm.
tends to operate out of sight of conscious awareness. If I email you every 5 minutes for like a whole day, I will be very top of mind, but in an annoying way. The better form of mere exposure would be something like things I do. Like I send a lot of emails. A lot of things I write to people are things that could very well be forwarded. Like I'm talking to someone in an organization about whether I could come speak for them. And knowing full well that that's probably not just their own decision. They might be forwarding it to 10 people. Here's what Alison said. What do you think, et cetera. So, and a lot of people might get that email and be like, who's Alison? So I do things like I put my signature block more than I probably have to in emails. No one says, "Oh my God, that's so ridiculous. Your signature's there." People are just like, "Well, that's probably your default. Whatever. I don't need it. I don't need your signature." But I always think my email could be sent to someone who has absolutely no idea who I am. And there, in like 3 lines, they can learn a lot about me. They could be on my website in a click. They see a picture of me. They see I've written a book. Like right there, there's information. And they're like, next time they're like, "Oh, I've heard of Alison." So sometimes we want to be subtle about it, but the recognition of your name, even if people don't have a deep experience with you, they've heard of you, can start to boost that liking. So looking for the subtle ways, but no, not doing what you're saying, which is I'm like, here I am, here I am, here I am, here I am. That's annoying.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot. I had to cancel the meeting. So, okay, so you talk a lot about storytelling, which is a big part of what we do as well. I've actually taught storytelling at Fuqua, which is, I was like right in your backyard. And so because it's so important how we tell the story of who we are. And if you could tell the story of that first job you had with that M person,
Oh yeah, yeah. It's
who,
still
because
okay.
a great example.
Totally. So, okay. So I'm in Chicago now, but I come to Chicago for the very first time out of Dartmouth to work for McKinsey, based in Chicago, and get there. And I did not know what I wanted to be when I grow up. So I take this job because everyone says this is a great opportunity. It's great to figure out like what area of business you want to be in, and it's prestigious. And so take it. Fine. And I get there and I get put on a team, a consulting team. And there's a just out of business school grad who is there. He's been there about a year. And he is clearly has a very good reputation in the company. And I keep hearing, oh, you're working with so and so. I call him M. He's great. He's great. Like he's one of the stars of that class. He's definitely going to be a partner. McKinsey's a very up or out place. So people are very focused on who's doing well, who's making it, who's going to get cut, all this stuff. So I'm like, okay, great. I'm excited to meet this guy. Long story short, I meet the guy, and he is an incompetent jerk. He is mean, and he just makes the most basic mistakes. And I am like, cannot stand to hear everyone talk about how amazing he is because working with him is insufferable. But I'm also perplexed. Why could people think he's amazing? There's no redeeming qualities whatsoever. And so I confessed this eventually to another senior person that I worked with who agrees with me. He says, I don't get it either. And he then starts to do a little bit of forensic investigating to try to figure this out. And we eventually, it takes him about a year, but eventually comes in my office one day and he's like, you're not going to believe it. I figured out where all the good information about this guy comes from. Where? He's like, it comes from him. He's like, basically, I like reverse traced these pieces of information as people said it. Like, where'd you hear it? Where'd you hear it? And essentially what happened is he self-promoted his way into this stellar reputation. Most people hadn't worked with him because it was such a siloed team environment. So he would go around talking about how great he was on his team, which wasn't their team. So they have no idea. And you're the expert on yourself. So you're like, things must be going great. And then those people would repeat it and they'd be like, he's doing so great. And so he had like, talked his way into this reputation. Now, I think most people have seen somebody like that in their life. And what most people, I think, take away from it, particularly women, is, oh my God, what a fraud. I would never want anyone to see me as a fraud. Therefore, lesson, I should not be bragging about myself. I don't want to be seen as a fraud. I was 21 years old. I took a totally different lesson and I felt like it was life-changing. My lesson was, well, if that jerk can do it, I can certainly do it. Like, imagine how effective your storytelling can be if you actually are good at something and you're warm. And so to me, it just showed me the power of your own storytelling to shape that people don't know, and you're the expert, and that's how they see you. And so I'm not encouraging anybody to be a fraud, but what I'd say is, again, the people I talk to are not frauds. They are smart and giving. And so a little bit of storytelling goes a long way. And everybody who has had that epiphany, and I talk about some other people I interview in the book, they start to realize like, 80%, 90% of the work I'm doing with a little bit of self-promotion gets me way more respect from my audience than the 150% of the work I was doing over here in a corner that nobody knew about. So it's not about slacking, but it's about making use of all the tools you have available to be able to get maximum credit for what you're already doing. That's amazing.
Yeah. It's so reminding me. I remember being at the Improv like maybe 15 years ago and doing a set and coming off but sitting in the back and watching the other comedians. And I saw this woman like tank, like crickets. And somehow from the stage to the bar, she rewrote the whole thing and was just like, yeah, that was awesome. Like they loved me. And that again, like I often just feel so fish out of water in moments like that because I'm so like relentlessly honest. And I was just like, wait, what? But who was to know? Anybody standing at the bar would have no way of disputing what she said. So, you
Yeah,
know,
and and we neither of us want to be that person, right? We want to have some self-awareness and humility. But what I think is probably was your tendency, and certainly mine, is you get off the stage and everyone laughs like crazy, and and you go over to the bar and say, that third joke, I didn't deliver it the way right?
yes,
That's not needed, right? And so you might
yeah,
feel that way, but you could just say, or someone says great job, and you'd be like, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Like, I came to make people laugh, it made you laugh. I feel super good about that. Like,
yes,
you don't
yeah.
have to what most of us do is we don't there's telling no story, but then it's like, no, we're actively telling a bad story that's trying to get people to think less of it than it is.
Well, I think it tends to be a little bit of self-involvement too, because we do, I've done a lot of corporate stuff now, and I'll get like one name wrong or one fact, and then it's like, oh, and then, in fact, we did this event at the Dartmouth Entrepreneur Network. It's like too much Dartmouth today, but anyway, I spoke the keynote at the Entrepreneur Network, and there were things that I didn't say that I wanted to say. I could barely make eye contact, and yet what the feedback was like, oh, you guys were great. Thank God you ended with laughter. It was just what we need. All positive, all positive. You would never have known that in my brain. So I do think it's a discipline then and that again, like concrete steps in your book, like this is a discipline to.
Practicing anything improves it. So, for example, like this point, the things I've gotten better at over time is because I'm in situations where I get to practice. Like receiving a compliment and not batting it down, it comes with practice. The more you do it, the more it feels natural to say thank you. I'm glad that made an impact. When you present or you have an opportunity and someone, you feel all those errors, and to say, I don't really need to advertise those. No one's asking me about my errors, right? I can just keep those to myself. I don't think it's in the book, but it's one of the things I quote all the time when people ask me for impactful quotes. A bunch of years ago, I tore my knee, freak eyebrow waxing incident, separate story. And have to do this surgery, and I'm stuck on crutches without being able to put my foot down for about 8 weeks in the winter. So I spend a lot of time working from my bed. And while I'm doing my physical therapy in bed, binge watching The French Chef with Julia Child from the 70s. Great binge. Just like the sourdough, didn't cook one damn thing. Okay. I made no beef bourguignon or anything, but I loved watching it. And her one-liners are spectacular. The absolute best one-liner was, I don't like a meal that doesn't have wine at all. That was a great one-liner. But the second one, more relevant for our purposes, is she said, never apologize for the food you serve. No one knows how it was supposed to turn out but you. And I think, isn't that true? No one wants to be
Oh,
invited
that's
into someone's
good.
home with an apology about dinner, but no one wants to listen to your talk and then have to have this like apologizing about how the things you didn't do. No one knows how it was supposed to turn out but you. And so one of the things that I think about a lot is like that quote influences me to think, is the thing I'm about to cut myself down on something other people have said that they recognize? Or am I putting that out there when no one even thinks that's a thing? And the more I practice doing it to the point of practice, the easier it is to do. So I always say, like, start small and practice whatever feels challenging for you at the time. And then at some point, that will feel super easy to you. And then you can turn up the heat and practice something else.
Excellent. All right. So somewhere I grabbed a quote of you talking about improvisation, and improvisation is key. And so I'm wondering if you can, if there was something specific you were referring to in your experience, actually using that and having that be true. Improv.
So I'm wondering if it could be Kelly Leonard. Who did we talk about our mutual like knowledge and love of
No, we
Kelly Leonard?
haven't talked about Kelly. No, but
Okay.
yes.
So Kelly Leonard from Second City is a very dear friend of mine. I was on his Yes and podcast. So that
Right.
might have been where it comes from. But I don't know if I've talked about it. Like, I mean, I think there's definitely the practice element of it, or the, being able to think about reacting. Do you remember what I said about improv?
Just that it was vitally important. Like it's or a tool that's in your toolbox of
Yeah.
responding.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, I think that the thing now, I have never done improv. So this is where I'm seeing this as an outsider, but my kids have. I know Kelly and things like, but the idea of reacting to someone else and basically building off of what you're getting. What I think about improv is it's a highly psychological process that forces you to pay really close attention to your audience. In this case, your audience is the other people that you are doing the improv with, and that is the same skill in building status. And it's just a good
Mm.
life skill. One of the things I think has benefited me the most in managing my own life is the fact that my day job is being a psychologist, because my day job is forcing me to think about what is going on in other people's heads, and then thinking about how do you shape that. And that carries with me. And that's very much an improv skill, which is I can't play off of you until I can kind of think about how you're thinking about this. And the more we start to think about what's in my audience's head, how do I meet them? So, how do I show up for them the way I want them to see me depends on like what do they see as warm? What do they see as capable? It doesn't matter if you think it's warm or if it's capable. It's what they get to judge. So that element there of thinking about your audience, just like the skilled improvers get, that starts to feel easy. The more you
Yeah.
start to think about it, like in your day-to-day life, it starts to feel easy.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're talking about is active listening, like really being present and really listening. And that's something that, that we use and talk about and teach and run work, constant interactive games and exercises to try to get people to really appreciate that.
Yeah,
Uh,
so if you start to figure out like what people care about, you have massive clues as to how to show up as warm and how to show up as capable. So,
yeah,
so if you are like talking about you know, being a comedian, you're talking about like giving speeches, working with whatever it is, then as something like kind of crosses my desk, I can think about how to add value to you. Maybe it's an introduction that I could make of maybe someone I know in the improv space who's doing something similar, but you don't know them yet. I could make that introduction, but I can only can do that because I've been paying attention to what you care about.
yeah,
Or if you tell me something that you're trying to get better at, I could share a resource and I could say, I read this thing. It's very relevant to the topic you were talking about. You might actually get some great tips from it. So that comes from, if I understand what you care about, then I understand how to show you that I care about you and add value to you.
right.
Uh, and that's where I think a lot of people do miss opportunities to pay attention to their audience in that way.
Yeah, it's kind of a yes and philosophy for life, like really taking it beyond the two words and being like, I'm seeing you, and here's how I want to contribute to your life, which again, I just love in the writing that you've done. And you taught, I was interested in the negotiation piece because you make clear that it's not just about money. There's other things that you can negotiate for. And it reminded me when I wrote the article about the experience with my mother for AARP, that very first article that ended up launching the whole business, they had wanted to send someone to interview me. They said, oh, it's a good story. We'll send someone to LA and interview you. And I was like, no, 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 I want to write it. I'm going to write it because I've written books and I want to write it. And they said, well, okay, but it's just going to be on the web. We'll just put it on the web. And I was like, okay, fine, because I'm going to write. And then it was a bigger story and it did end up in print. But that was one of those moments of like, no, I know I'm not getting money. It's magazine money. I mean, I'm not going to make a lot of money, but I can negotiate for something else. So I think that's like such again, for your students to hear and for everyone to hear and for women to hear that, yes, we all are focused on the bottom line, but in fact, there's other ways to negotiate. And someone has a question for you about negotiating in the chat.
Do it. What does
Um,
it say?
What's one of the, here we go. In your book, you speak about asking for things that you expect to get a no in response to in order to practice negotiation comfort and skills. What's one of the funniest, most awkward no responses you receive personally? That's a pretty funny question.
Oh, that is a good question. And then of course I'm going to I'm going to ponder this. We're going to come back to this. So I'll have
Okay, I'm thinking about
a,
it.
a good one.
Good no,
Um,
right.
I will tell you a funny story. It's not about the responses I've received personally, but I used to many moons ago when I taught undergraduate students, used to do this exercise um, with them. And I've learned a couple of things. The only thing I think you cannot negotiate for successfully that I've ever found in terms of an item that you're purchasing is the price of gas. I have had many students try over 20 years. Not one student has been able to save even a penny off of the pump price on gas. Okay, so that seems to be non-negotiable. And I ultimately had to stop doing this with my undergraduates because undergraduates have no shame. By the time people get older, they're embarrassed enough about their reputation that it'll limit what they do. Undergraduates have no shame whatsoever. They're like, I'm being sent out into the world to like try to see if I can, get good, good outcomes or turn down. And I had multiple students. I used to have a rule that you couldn't break the law. After having multiple students decide they were going to go into grocery stores, they were going to, I think they did this with the best of intentions, but I was like, guys, this is not a good idea. They would go into grocery stores and they would then damage something, like take a can and drop it on the ground and then be like, this can is dented, and then go try to negotiate at the front to buy a dented can for less. And or like poke a hole in a bag of potato chips, but then it turns out they won't sell you the bag of potato chips with a hole in it because it's like that could actually really be contaminated. So they destroyed it for no actual benefit. So I will think of things that have happened to me, but those are like when I think about doing that with my students over the years, I had to learn to get smarter about how to instruct them how to do it because they were so eager to go and succeed that they did all of these things. And I was like, that's not really the lesson that I wanted to teach when you go home and tell your parents that you were denting cans in the grocery store because your professor gave you an assignment.
All right, I have something for you to think about while you're thinking about that, because I am very curious. So, I'm a woman of a certain age, and when you get to my age, you keep hearing like, well, I'm at the age where I don't have any more fucks to give. I'm sorry to swear, everyone. But that is the popular vernacular. I don't have any more fucks to give. Like, I don't care what people think. And not really my experience. I might still be immature in that way. And I'm also so curious because everything for you is strategic authenticity, strategic warmth. And it seems to me you have to have an eye on what people think of you. Like your eye is on what people think of you and how you're kind of landing, how your being is landing on people and how you square. I mean, it works for me because as I said, I still have a few more fucks to give. But for people who really that's aspirational of like, I don't have any more fucks to give, how you kind of square that thing together.
Yeah. So there's no doubt as I've gotten older, like I look at my kids and the things that they care about their peers and how the peers will evaluate them. And I'm like, I don't care about any of these things. There's a beauty of getting older and saying, I can feel unburdened from the expectations of other people. Now, that said, that part of I'm not so obsessed about it, it does not making me unhappy. That part I think is great. But if we take it to the extreme, so, look, I would say, actually washed and dried my hair today, put on some makeup, but a lot of times I'm sitting by myself and I don't. And then I got to go pick up my kids and I'm going out in like who knows what, right? And I'm like, I don't care, right? Doesn't matter to me. But then imagine like you run into somebody that is like a client or something and you're like, it's okay, like that I don't have my hair brushed, but you're cognizant of, oh, in this moment, given this relationship, I'm not actually showing up in the way that might be the most intentional way. If I knew I was going to meet with them today, I would have at least brushed my hair. And so there are moments where you're like, but I do sometimes care. So you don't have to care about everybody. You don't have to do it to the point where you are miserable. But that
Right.
also doesn't mean you act with complete disregard for anybody else's feelings or expectations of like, I made you cry. I don't care. That's not really what people mean, right? People mean is like, I feel like I'm licensed to be my authentic self without always feeling like I have to answer to somebody else. But I always say you get to it. No one ever is done living and growing till you're done living and growing. So you might say, I'm kind of got to the point where I have all the status I need in this space over here. Maybe it's my job. Like I'm really senior. I'm going to retire soon. But most people I know are like, I'm not just going to like sit in a rocking chair and just do the crossword the rest of my life. I have value to contribute. I might want to go volunteer. I might want to go do some board service. I
Yeah.
might, want to, whatever it is. And if you want to go do those things, how other people see you still matters. Like you can't just shuffle in to the volunteer organization saying whatever you want, looking like a crazy person and expecting them to sign you up for, an important position. You'd have to present yourself. You're not just going to go get on a board being like, because I want you to put me on a board. You'd have to present yourself. So there's always going to be moments where we need to think about how do we show up. And we can also do that without feeling like we have to cater to everybody else's preferences. We don't. We get to decide who we want to build our status with. But even when you feel like you're very senior in your career, that set is not zero. There are still people that you still want to respect you and value you, because that's going to be a resource for you to be able to do the work you want to do, the things that matter to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it with, as it can't make you miserable. Like, it can't make you miserable anymore.
No.
That is hopefully the maturity of, like, you can't with the voices. I really want to answer this question. How do you promote to or establish status with someone who has shown that they do not understand nor are interested in what you do on a daily basis? In general, can you improve your status with someone? Great question.
Okay, so I think of them as two slightly different questions. So I'll answer the second one first. Can you improve your status? What I think that might mean is, like, I don't have very high status and they've kind of decided they don't really value me and now I need to improve it. Yes, you can do that. It's the same idea of, like, showing up as warm as you can and capable as you can, but you have to do it consistently for a longer period of time. It's not as easy as making a first impression. So if we think about someone you might have not really liked or respected that much at the beginning, and over time they really won you over, everyone can think of somebody in that category. I can think of somebody that really stands out to me, but it didn't happen overnight with a single moment. You have to stick with it. And what I find for a lot of people is they do want to change that person's mind. They stick with it for a little, but when it doesn't produce instant results, they get frustrated and then they let that frustration show, and then the relationship just gets worse. So stick with it. If it's an important relationship to you and you think you've gotten yourself in a bit of a hole, it's definitely recoverable, but you've got to keep consistently showing up as capable and caring and looking for ways to do that. And I can't give you like a number of months or number of years or whatever it is, but if you do it consistently enough and they're paying attention, there you'll be able to change their mind. On the first part of how do you establish the status, here's the thing. You show up as capable on things, you get respect when you show up as capable on things that they care about, not things that you care about. So that, I think, is really this idea of active listening and what your audience cares about. So, and it doesn't even have to be work related if you show you have some value in it. So, like, I look for whatever somebody's story is and think about what could I add to that might be helpful. So here's an example. I talk to a lot of women who have kids, and many of them I talk to have younger kids, and they're struggling to think about, how do I do this whole thing? I haven't been a working mom all that long, trying to do all this stuff. It feels really hard. I've done this stuff for longer than some, not as long as others, but, like, I consider myself really, really good through the lessons my husband and I have had to learn at hiring childcare that really sings and supports my ability to be a good mom and to be good at all of this stuff that I do for pay. I think I'm really good at that. So if I'm talking to somebody who's not a parent, that is my skill that I have. That is probably not very relevant to them. So talking about how great I am at that, they would be like, boring, useless. But if I talk to a mom who has young kids who has expressed to me, this has been hard for me, then I'm like, oh, there's a moment to talk about something that I could add value to. But it's not because I'm good at it. It's because I'm good at it and you need it. So it's not just about singing your skills. It's talking about a skill set that you have that's meeting somebody else where they are looking for those opportunities. So, I'll share one example of this. I do think it's worthwhile starting with what you're good at and what you like, because those are meaningful contributions, and looking for people who value those things. So a woman in a program that I was presenting was doing a lot of Instagram reels and documenting of the live stuff. And then she makes a comment in front of everybody that she's likes Instagram, she's good at it, but that her senior colleagues don't see it as very valuable. And they think it's kind of like kids stuff, like that's what the kids these days do. So she says, I want to be taken seriously as a professional. At the same time, I want to be authentic to, this is who I am. This is what I like to do. How do I balance that? And I said, well, have you ever tried to think about how you could make the thing you're good at, Instagram, like relevant or valuable to them? So just talking about the fact that you're good at it is no service to them. But let's say you offer to take a video of the person giving their, like, a big presentation and say, hey, I noticed you're on social media. Like, what if I videoed you and edited it and I gave it to you as a video? You could post on your social, or we could post it on the company social page to show the great work we're doing. Then your talent is actually meeting a need that somebody else has. So it's not wrong to start with yourself, but you only works when you can translate what I'm good at to, and here's how it could actually help you to tell that story. And that will get you further than simply like, I've got skills over here.
Yeah. I appreciate that a lot. I have by default become like the death of a parent go-to, the Alzheimer's, managing your feelings and their feelings and care and all of that. And I'm happy to be of service in that way. And that is authentic to me. And it is a good use of like, what are we here for if not to use what we're gifted in life? And that is a point that you make so beautifully also, that we're all an expert at something, you know? And I think that's so important. If you tend towards the self-deprecation or seeing the mistakes, and to actually take the time and pinpoint, okay, what am I actually expert at? Like, you had no intention to be an expert at managing 3 kids under 17, but guess what? Like, that's how you have become that by default, and you can share that. So I think we're gonna wrap it up here, but you know, again, what I love is the generosity woven throughout this. Like, that's another, it feels like it could be like strategic generosity.
Mhm.
Could also, you know, be a moniker, because that's what you're saying. Like, bring your best self and share it, and that will ultimately affect your status and the respect that you get. So super.
Like, being giving in a assertive way, ways that uniquely highlight your talents and contributions. So I know we're wrapping. Someone said something about introverts, and I'm just going to tell people out there, because I get this question every single time. I'm an introvert. When you speak for a living, people don't get that, of how to, like, they can't imagine, like, oh, you're presenting, but people are depleting to me. I will just tell you, yes, you can do it. You can build it. I think social media is a great gift to introverts. I got on social in COVID, and one of the things I realized, what I would never have predicted, was it's such a great way to add value to a large audience, and I don't have to look anybody in the eye. I can post something, close my computer, and people are like, oh my God, that was so helpful. Thank you. And it preserves all of my energy. So that's not the only way to do it, but I just tell anyone who's out there as an introvert, you can absolutely convey warmth. You can build status, you can build reputation, and consider the possibility of doing it behind a screen might be the way to conserve your energy.
Okay, and when you're ready to have human contact and real eye contact, come on and have some laughter, interactive stuff, because we all love this. I'm so grateful to be able to meet you, Allison, here. This never would have happened pre-COVID, but really valuing the human connection too, which I know you make a point of as well. So wonderful. I want to shout out to Cindy Cornell, who actually introduced us. So thank you. Thank you, Cindy. And thank you so much. This has really been a pleasure. I feel like I've learned a lot. We're getting a lot of hearts and claps, and
I'm also impressed that people, I don't even know how to do that thing, that heart thing. Thankfully, I'm like presenting and I don't have to make it happen. But I have to learn how to use Zoom. Thank you. This is awesome. You're the best.
oh, thank you. Yes. And you're the real, you are an example of what you talk about in terms of promoting others, because you really put it up there on LinkedIn for us. And that was great. And again, like, stuff like that, it's free. You just come from a generosity of spirit. And I think we were able to speak to a lot of people while they ate salads or had martinis. So it's all good.
I hope there were martinis. I really do hope there were martinis involved in this. Yes.
And go buy the book, please. Buy the book, Likable Badass. All right.
Amazing. Thank
Okay,
you.
that's it.